Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Imhauser. You can find me on all the places, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, at Hawk Blogger. And, I've got some really important news for all of you. It's either going to be extremely good news or extremely bad news, because there's no in between when it comes to this news. Evan Hill, who was due to be on the show, had to bow out, had some family stuff come up. We're wishing him well. But I know, because I've read enough of the comments, there's going to be some people that are absolutely celebrating that that's the case. And there's some people that are just crushed that he's not here, because no one feels just in the middle about Evan Hill. But what I know everyone's going to be excited about is we found a pinch hitter, man. We found a guy that is like a middle of the lineup guy. And he was just waiting. He was waiting for the call at midnight his time. Rob Staten joins us from across the pond for his Real Hawk Talk debut, man. How are you doing, Rob?
Yeah, I'm very, very good. I was on a plane a few hours ago coming back from France, and I've had a very relaxing afternoon back home. But when you sent me the message, I fancy a bit of Seahawks talk. Why not? So let's do it.
We love that about you. You are as much of a sicko as any of us, maybe more so. And I wouldn't say that about almost anybody. That's the biggest compliment I could give. Jeff, you spent plenty of time with both of us. Who's more sick in the head about the Seahawks, Rob or me?
Very different, very different. You guys have some very similar quirks. A little anxiety that comes up. Me and Rob went through that Mike McDonald search together. We struggled with that one both together. But I have to stay up to watch a sports game my time at 3 a.m, and it hit me I'm like, oh my God, Rob does this all the time. Like, how does he do this? It crushed me. So I got to give Rob what he's doing at some of those hours, watching the draft. I got to go with Rob on this one.
I think that's fair. Honestly, I don't think, as much as I love the Seahawks, if I had to watch them at 3 a.m. regularly, I think that would not happen. I think I'd be a DVR guy and just not let anyone else tell me what's going on. So always impressed and always happy to have Rob on the show. So we've got a fun topic for tonight. We're going to kind of try to figure out and remind ourselves what the building of Seahawks championship level teams have felt like before we knew that they were championship level teams. So we're going to primarily focus on the Pete Carroll era, because I think that's where most people have the most memory and recollection. We can go back to the Mike Holmgren 2003, 2004, 2005 days if you want, but we're going to kind of get into it and try to remember what that was like and see where we would place this Seahawks team in that progression. Because I think we all feel pretty good about the direction things are going, but let's try to figure out where they're going. Before we get to that topic, there are some bits of news we should cover. And Jeff, I'm going to hit you first with this. You had one thing that was Seahawks related, one thing that was not. One was related to Mike Garafolo giving an update on the likelihood that Woolen will be moved.
Yeah, so Mike was on the NFL Network, and he said it's more likely than not the Seahawks don't trade him. And it said they're still figuring out. They still are hopeful he's part of their plan. So I don't know if the market's not very good. I don't know if they're asking someone to make them an offer to blow them away, or the situation has changed with Witherspoon and Love, and maybe you don't want to make a potential weakness weaker. And so that's been my kind of read on it, that the situation might dictate, because his name has slowly come out of the news a little bit over the last week or so. And so I think I was kind of hopeful that they would keep him. I've been pretty harsh on him overall, but I saw what life was like without him, and I think the team did too. I wonder if the whole Witherspoon thing and then Love getting re-injured kind of changed the whole equation there.
Rob, would you consider it good news if Woolen doesn't get traded, or bad news?
I think I'm really, really indifferent to the news. I think it's pretty clear that I think they wanted to trade him. And I think Mike McDonald has, for whatever reason, it's just not quite a fit, whether that's a schematic thing, a personality thing, an application thing, or a bit of everything. I think they've been eager to sort of move on. And I just wonder whether the last few weeks with these injuries in the secondary have made them think, okay, well, if we're going to do it, it needs to be a good return. And if teams are ringing and saying, well, we'll give you the kind of deal that New England have just got for Keon White, what's the point? I mean, you might as well just keep him. And especially if you then, let's say you traded him for the ham sandwich, the proverbial ham sandwich that the Patriots got for Duggar and White this week. you'd then presumably have to go and acquire a cornerback yourself. And that might end up being more expensive for a lesser player. So I just think the trade market has worked against the Seahawks on this one, and they've decided, do you know what? He's better off just being on the roster. We'll see what happens in the off season. We'll dangle the carrot that way. We still believe he could be have a future with this team. There's maybe a bit of motivation that look, no, Reek, if you still play really well in the last few games of this season, there may be a big contract offer on the table for you. But it's perhaps not the scenario they wanted, but the scenario they've got.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between you guys, and you guys know me. I tend to read too much into a lot of little things, and they're beyond saying Mike Garafolo saying that they're not potentially going to trade him. He also said that they haven't closed the door to him being part of their future plans, and there's one interpretation there, which is exactly what Rob said. They're like, well, if we're going to keep him, we're going to try to dangle this carrot and get the most out of him. That would make perfect sense. And I think that's a totally reasonable, although cynical perspective. I think it's a very reasonable one. But there's this other perspective, guys, that I heard a tone of voice with Mike McDonald when asked about Reek Woolen last week that was different than I've heard from him pretty much ever. He was like talking about him in practice, and he was like, that's the Reek Woolen we know. And it stood out to me. I was like, like that phrase even was kind of interesting. That implied that they haven't been seeing the Reek Woolen that they know. And now something changed. I didn't get a chance to ask Mike McDonald about it because I forgot to, frankly, but I asked him last year if they did anything like midterm performance reviews, because all teams do outbound like at the end of the year. And he said, as a matter of fact, we do. Last year they did that at the bye week. I don't know if they did that again this year, but I wonder if they had a little bit of a, meeting of the minds and talked things out, and maybe they feel a little bit different about Reek Woolen than they did before that. Plus all the other stuff you're saying. So I don't know. I could tell you when I talk to people in and around the organization, there's some folks that feel like Reek Woolen adds a lot to that locker room. It sets a tone in terms of like levity and just like energy that there's people that feel like it would be a big deal if he left. So I don't know. I think generally, I think it's better news that he's around, unless they were going to get some kind of smoking deal. And Rob, I gotta out both Jeff and Evan on this. We were texting and I was like, well, maybe, I could see Detroit giving up like a third, because that's like they're going to be at the end of the round. It's almost like a fourth. They got a lot of injuries at corner. And Evan's like, I'm not giving him up for a third. And Jeff's like, I'd need a second. And I'm like, whoa, that's a big change from where people were on this guy not so long ago. What would you consider a reasonable return if they did make a trade?
A fifth rounder.
Like, you'd be happy about that?
Oh, I'm not saying I'd be happy. I wouldn't be rushing to the laptop to write a scathing review of it. I just think I think we have to be a little bit realistic. I mean, I'm saying that knowing full well the Seahawks traded away what they traded away for Ernest Jones just a year ago, which was more than on what I'm proposing here. But Keon White going for what he did, that's perhaps swaying my opinion on this a little bit as we speak today. If they traded him and got a fifth round pick, I'd go, well, okay, they clearly wanted to move him on, so I'm going to take that side of it. I wouldn't be jumping for joy. I mean, if they got a third rounder for him, I'd be rushing to the blog to say John Schneider's on a heck of a tear here. Like, this is what a masterstroke he's pulled off. To get at that for a player whose contract's expiring, who even hearing what you said there, I don't think he's going to be with the Seahawks next season unless the market he's so bad in free agency that you sense an opportunity there to give him another year if they wanted to do that. So, yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Jeff, any other thoughts before we move on to the next topic here?
No, like I wasn't saying I would think they could get a second. I even prefaced the text when I wrote you saying there's zero chance they could.
Right.
I just saw what life was like with Shaquille Griffin and Nehemiah Pritchett, and Josh Job's been a little up and down. And for a team that I think is in a competitive window, I'd rather have Woolen than I would need something more than a third round pick to me to put. We saw what happened in the Tampa Bay game. Like, they couldn't compete, and they're gonna have to beat teams like that in the playoffs. So if I didn't think this team was any good, the 5th rounder would be totally fine.
Yeah.
But the equation changed.
Well, other bits of news, just catching people up that didn't see. We've got some more injury news for both the Seahawks and the Commanders. Injury report came out today. Jake Bobo shows up on the injury report for the first time, has limited with an Achilles injury. Not good. Derek Hall is still limited for the 2nd straight day, which makes me wonder if he's actually going to be back this week, or they're going to give him another week to kind of get up to speed. Cooper Kupp went from full to limited and went from just having a heel issue to now also having a hamstring issue. So that's a concern. Robbie Utes, good side, was a full participant for the 2nd straight day. Jaron Reed, limited for the 2nd straight day. Not great. Eric Saubert, the tight end, did not participate for the 2nd straight day. It's looking like he might not be available for the first time this year. Devin Witherspoon was a full go. So he's looking like he's on his way. We already know Julian Love, not going to be available. Derek Young, not going to be available. The Commanders, interesting stuff there as well. Defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw went from full to limited. He did get injured in the game against the Chiefs. They seemed to think he was going to be able to come back, but maybe things went the wrong way. Their place kicker, Matt Gay, could not play against the Chiefs with a back issue. He did go from did not practice to limited. But then the other thing, another defensive tackle, Johnny Newton, who so many people wanted the Seahawks to draft instead of Byron Murphy, he went to from limited to, or actually he did not participate in both days. So it's looking like he will not be available. And then Laramie Tunsil, their left tackle, went from DMP to limited. So a lot of stuff going on there, guys. Jeff, I'll start with you. What kind of grabs your attention?
I think the Johnny Newton thing was the biggest thing for me. When a veteran player like a Kupp or a Jaron Reed doesn't practice on a Thursday or is limited, that's pretty standard at this point of the season. They're already at week 9 and they're always trying to manage that. I always wait for the Friday injury report for those veteran players in the middle of the season that need to be managed. But when a guy like Newton, who's a young guy and is not practicing 2 days in a row, and the reports from like the local guys are saying they don't think he's going to play, there's not a lot of bright spots on that defense right now. And he flashes. I don't know how good he's been. Me and you, Brian, were not Newton fans in the first round last year, but I think he, of all the players you mentioned, and then the other one would be the Tunsil one. I think him not being out would be a huge deal. We've seen that the defensive line is done. They had to kick, I think, Brandon Coleman out there last time. And at first, when I saw it, didn't seem like he was going to play, but nothing on the Seattle side after the Julian Love story, that was the big one yesterday, is really stands out to me that much.
Rob, how about you? Anything grab your attention?
The thing that grabbed my attention was just a huge, massive disappointment that Julian Love has obviously had the setback. And, fun enough, the Dolphins are playing now. If the Ravens were to win this game, one of the first things I'd probably do tomorrow is give the Dolphins a call and see if there's any way whatsoever that they'd be willing to give you Minkah Fitzpatrick. Just because there's been a bit of talk. The Steelers fans have been pining for him to come back, to the extent that the local writers in Pittsburgh had to write stories this week saying he can't, by the rules, be traded back to the Steelers. You can't go from one team to another back to the team in a season. I didn't know that until
I didn't know that either.
Oh wow!
No. But you can go. But you can go to a third team. So if there was any prospects of that, just have a bit of extra security. Someone who almost forced his way out of the Steelers because he didn't want to play nickel. He wants to play safety. I think that's what we're doing with the other sort of names there. I think Jeff's hit the nail on the head. With some of those veterans, I think they're getting a rest day. But when you were sort of reading through those guys who are out for the Commanders and knowing the injury issues they've already got, and knowing that the quarterback's only just coming back and is probably, if we're being honest, being rushed back as well because their season's on the line. I don't like feeling this way, but I'm actually going to be really disappointed if the Seahawks don't win this game. Because
I hear you. We will get to predictions at the end, so save all that. We'll get to get going deeper on this in a little bit. But yeah, I agree. The Kinlaw Newton thing would be a really big deal. They're already thin on the defensive line, so I think Joe Witt might be their defensive coordinator, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm a little, little not liking what's going on with Johnny Newton." So it's got their attention as well. All right, a couple other quick things before we get into the topic at hand. There's a couple things from the press conferences today I just had to play. They were too good not to, especially with you guys on here. First, I had a chance to. I've been trying to figure out the right way to phrase this so I don't put Sam Darnold on the defensive. But you guys have both heard me. I was really it rang alarm bells. I've woke up thinking about it. His decision making in that game against Houston really concerned me. Like it didn't lose them the game, but it could have lost a lot of other games. So I asked him, hey, you've done a really good job of avoiding negative plays all year. You had a couple that I'm guessing you'd like back from Houston. What was different about those plays? Here is what Sam said.
Yeah, I think for me, like I was kicking myself a little bit, especially after the sack fumble. Just got to be situationally aware in that. Just understanding where we are on the field, understanding that they have a really good defense called against what we got in terms of our play call, and being able to either just dump it down to AJ on the check down. Maybe he gets the first down, breaks the tackle, and gets the first. Worst case scenario, we're punting the football. So just understanding the situation that way.
Guys, if I could have stood up and just gave him a standing applause, I would have standing ovation. I would have done it right there. That was everything I wanted to hear from him. I mean, how many times even last year I would ask questions of Gino, and I know you guys aren't big Gino guys. I am. And I would kind of lead him toward like situation, like maybe in the red zone, don't force it. Maybe don't hold on to the ball. Like you got to learn something from these situations, right? And it was just like stubbornness. I never got that. Sam, like I didn't lead him to it. He just said it. And I was like, oh, yes. Any thoughts from you guys on that one?
Just absolutely fantastic answer. I mean, I was smiling away listening to that. And it's a great question because, often with these press conferences in the past, I'd say, Brian, this obviously changed the last season and a half, not as we would say over here, blowing smoke up your arse. But, there would often, you wouldn't glean a great deal from a player interview. And that is a question that is a completely fair question. And it is not with a positive get out slant attached to it. And for him to sort of just talk in a completely normal, non-scripted way and open up about what he should have done differently, to the point he even name checked the check down that he should have gone to, shows two things. One, just a very mature player who's very comfortable in his own skin, but two, that he's clearly spent a lot of time trying to learn from that error and knows exactly what he should have done differently. And therefore that will hopefully mean that when if that situation arises again, he will have that muscle memory from that moment.
Jeff, I mean, people, I know because I've heard it from folks that listen. They're like, get over it. It was like one situation, it's a couple things, like it's not that big of a deal. It's because I think this team has such potential, and because I can imagine that moment in a Rams game or in a playoff game that everything hangs on, and if he doesn't learn from it, all the rest of it really won't matter that much. So this doesn't guarantee he's going to, but it was a pretty encouraging response.
It was. And the one thing I've really been impressed with Darnold is just self-awareness. And look, I've covered professional athletes, so have you both. And sometimes you just need to have like such an ego to be great at these sports, considering how good you're. And sometimes like self-awareness isn't great, but he just does it where he just feels like a normal dude. I think that's why he's really captured the locker room. And you saw a Minnesota clip last year where they went crazy for him. I think that's what people like about him. He did an interview with Mike Silver over the summer where he was talking about what happened at the end of last year. And most people would be a lot more like Gino, how the stories come out and how some of his quotes come out. And I'm not doing this to take a shot at Gino. It's just, I think Gino needed that chip on his shoulder to be great. And I think with Darnold, it's just hearing him not only say to him admit he screwed up, but go through the details. think that's a great answer. And I think that leads to just why he's been so popular his last couple stops. And Brian, I get where you're coming from, though. Like, I thought, like, look, every quarterback, like, you watch Mahomes throw a 99-yard interception that cost them against that crappy Jaguars team. And Stafford's made some plays this year where you're like, what in the world was that? But Darnold has the history of that, and we saw how last year ended. And I don't think it was the play. I think it was the fact that he thought he could spin out of that.
The moment
that was just like super low awareness at that point.
Yeah.
And they've lost 2 games where really he couldn't get the ball out quickly. Like, I think it was like, I didn't agree with you per se, but I understood where you were coming from.
Yeah.
So I'm glad he's aware of it. I'm glad he wasn't defensive. And I think it just says a lot about him and why he's kind of taken over 2 different locker rooms the last 2 years.
Can I just add something as well? I don't know if you guys saw this, but Carson Beck had a 4 interception game against Louisville the weekend before last. And then after the game, he was asked about one of the interceptions particularly, and his answer was, well, the receiver ran the wrong route.
Oh.
And, it's the worst thing you could say. I mean,
it is.
And the point, I was listening to somebody talk about this. I can't remember who it was. They were saying that's probably correct. What he said is probably true, but you don't say it. You know, you just say you've got to be better there. And the thing about that answer is Sam Darnold, really, he could have said, well, Zach Charbonnet does a terrible job on the chip. Both tackles get walked right back into my face.
Clint Kubiak made a bad play call.
Well, yeah, exactly. Why are we doing that play in that situation? He's got loads of like ways that could not be his fault, and he went to the one thing that was his responsibility, which is what you have to do, and he did it very comfortably and without any kind of. I'm saying this through gritted teeth. So
yeah. All right. There's one other thing I've got to play for you guys because I know it's going to rile Rob up, and I just can't help myself. JSN was asked about whether he knew if he was going to get fined for his dunk on the goalpost, and this was what he said.
When I came down and landed, I was like, yeah, I'm getting fined. Yeah, I knew.
Money well spent. Was it money well spent?
Yes and no, but yeah, low key, yeah.
What do you think? I mean, just they fine you for that. Yeah, that plays everywhere. Like the NFL's used it on their social media and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. The message they send that they fine you for that, yet they seem to enjoy the fact that you did it.
Yeah, we had conversations about that, and trying to figure it out. But at the end of the day, that's something that I can't do, and I have to know. But I guess they can do whatever they want with that.
So I feel like JSN's coming out of his shell a little bit. I know Rob doesn't like part of it, but he had one more quote I'm going to play for you guys. I'll get that queued up. But Rob, any notes for you there?
No, I was completely fine with that, actually. I mean, I don't like. I've seen a number of people have made this point, and I think it's a great point that the league has that. It's a great image of him sort of dunking the football, and it has. I've seen that picture all over the place. It's not screen grabs off the TV. It's NFL photographers who are there taking that. I think it is one of the most stupid things about the NFL. The sheer number of fines that are given out every single week. And frankly, I understand why that's a penalty, because they don't want someone who's a lot bigger than JSN, Jimmy Graham, swinging off the goalpost and potentially bringing the whole thing down and someone getting seriously hurt. I understand why you wouldn't want to do that. But my word, the league just makes it so hard to have fun sometimes. And when I'm watching that touchdown, it was a fantastic throw, great catch. And within, you don't have any time to really enjoy it before you're thinking, oh no, that's going to be a penalty. Because he's dunked the football a little bit. And the referee was panicking and the arms went up and he's thinking, what's going on? I'm fully behind Justice with the GBA, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The fines. What is with the fines? Like, just send him a letter saying, "Don't do that again, please."
How about just the penalty?
Fine. Yeah, the penalty is enough. Like, if a player punches somebody in the face, they should be fined. Right. If a player does something dirty and it can lead to a serious injury, they should be fined or suspended. Dunking a football is not a finable offense. It's
100%. And Jeff, I'll play for you the other quotable from JSN, your favorite guy. He was asked like how he goes. Like, is it something that he's worked on to make all his routes look the same? And here was his answer.
Yeah, I mean, we as a receiver, I feel like you have to be a salesman. You have to sell something, to get something, to get what you want, So
I'm gonna just leave it there because we got other stuff. But that was pretty quotable, man. That was pretty good.
The guy's coming out of his shell a little bit. I feel
Right?
like he's trying to get maybe his next like Jordan contract or something. He's been kind of an unassuming guy. Him being dunked, it could be put on posters. He's starting to get quotes. I feel like this guy's going to become. This is like a superstar breaking out. It's pretty cool to see.
That's kind of my read too. I think he's getting there. All right. So let's we've teased it early. Let's talk about it now. So, first of all, like try to send yourself back in time to let's go to 2011 with the Seahawks. Pete Carroll's second season. They come off a 7-9 year. They'd won the division with a 7-9 record, and they'd won a playoff game with Beastquake, but they had kicked Matt Hasselbeck to the curb. They had signed Tavares Jackson as a free agent. They did have Marshawn Lynch already. They brought Tom Cable in as a offensive line coach. There's a little bit of change there. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. Remember, it was Jeremy, what is it?
Jeremy Bates.
Bates the first year. Pete fired him, and then they brought in Darrell Bevel. So there's just like a lot of things that are kind of similar there. But you didn't have your long-term quarterback. You ended up 7-9 that year. The defense, Richard Sherman, Brandon Browner, like the LOB was starting to form. We didn't really know what Pete Carroll was going to do. Do you remember like back then, Jeff, do you remember like what you felt like did you feel like something was happening? What was the key moment?
It took really until the first year and a half until we really started to learn what Pete did. The first year was like, there were some moments where it was really fun, but like you can see the team wasn't very good. And then they went in a huge slump at the end of the year. You just saw like the lack of talent show up, and then Charlie Whitehurst had to play. And the second year they're coming out of the lockout and they got a new quarterback and a horrible offensive line. And you're just like, is this team a disaster? Like people nationally were saying Pete Carroll might get fired. And then this, like either halfway through the year, there was like a 3-game stretch. And I was talking about this the other day. First, they played Dallas and they actually lost the game. But it was the first time like Marshawn Lynch started to figure out the zone cut offense with Tom Cable. And they talked about this after. And then the next week they played Baltimore and using the same style. And that team almost went to the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl the next year, Baltimore. And they just beat them. Like they out-physicaled them. Marshawn Lynch had that crazy play against Ray Lewis. And then it was like, okay, maybe that was a fluke. And then the next week was a Thursday night game against the Eagles. And Softy talks about this a lot where they just dummied. That was like the dream team Eagles. And they dummied them with the exact style where their defense took over. Marshawn Lynch, the skills were flying around. Pete Carroll did that set with Rich Eisen. And it was like, holy crap, I think they have something here that's real. And they end up going on like a win streak. And then they played the Niners team that was the best team in the league that year. Like no one had run a touchdown on them. That's where you start to see like, okay, if they drop a quarterback in there, this team can be real. And that little stretch is where the whole thing started to look like they had something. And the next year they end up drafting Russ and Bobby. And then the next year they get the pass rushers. But that little stretch at the end of 2011, everyone talks back to the drafting a lot, Russ. To me, that's when the LOB started to form. And you can even take it back where Sherman got inserted into the lineup, I think the week before, where they got killed in a game.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing just slowly started building parts of it. They were lacking parts, and they've solved those going into the next year. But you could see something special was happening at the end of that first year. No one talks about that, but I remember that vividly.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Sherman. Sherman was not the starter going into that season. I think Marcus Trufant got injured partway through the year, and that got Sherman a chance, and then he Wally pipped him. Like, he never came off after that. He was just a special teams player at that point. Rob, do you remember when were you already bought in going into 2011, or was there a point where you started saying, okay, well, this might be something interesting?
Well, I remember it well. I was one of my many visits to Seattle to watch the Seahawks lose 2011. So I went to the Bengals game. So that was they lost
the Sherman
game. The Sherman game, and they lost. And that I've just checked now. They were 2-5 after that. And I can remember, I don't know if you guys remember this chat. He's called Chris Sullivan. He used to write Seahawk Addicts.
Yeah.
The
blog. Oh, yeah, I know Chris.
And so my wife was
with Fortress.
That's correct. Yeah, my wife was with me for that game, and It's back when you could get a ticket for the Seahawks for like about $25 or something. We bumped. Well, I arranged to meet with Chris briefly after the game, and I seem to remember sort of being really frustrated and ranty about the fact that they need to get a quarterback, and they're not going to get into the mix for like that was the Andrew Luck year and stuff like that, and they were going to be just too good to be in that kind of mix, and I was like worried they were going to get stuck in this kind of middle ground. And then the end of the season, I kind of staying up for that Eagles game and just thinking, this is a team. I think was that Marshawn Lynch was coming off the, or was that that was the following year, wasn't it? When he was, or 2013 was going, we've got a mob, like he was saying that on the sideline, and you could just see like they were the most physical, hard-nosed team. They were going to smash you in the face every week. When it got to the end of that year, I remember being so pissed off they lost that Niners game, because that was when Greg Roman was celebrating in the next to the press box, and I remember all the local journalists saying how annoying that was, and I was really annoyed by that. And the Harbaugh team, just getting it done. And I remember off the back of that season thinking, this team just needs a quarterback. If they can just get a quarterback, this can be a really good team. But I really didn't want them to sign Matt Flynn. And that's exactly what they did. And I can remember thinking after that, and when they drafted Russell Wilson, it was I was like really sort of thinking, that's interesting. They're not completely sold on Flynn to take Wilson, and the rest is history. And I have to say, by the time that preseason had come around, I was thinking, well, they've got the guy, like like 9% of the fan base. This is going to be really exciting. Obviously, there was some growing pains a little bit at the start of the year, but I just remember that 2012 season was just so freaking magical. I don't think we'll ever see anything like that. We'll never, as fans, be able to live in the moment like that. The story, the journey, the characters, from the head coach to the players to the emerging quarterback, it was just perfect. Like if you had to sort of write a script for what you want your franchise to go through as a fan, it was that, and culminating obviously winning the Super Bowl. It's just a shame.
Yeah.
They didn't win two, but
they didn't win more. Yeah, I mean that was kind of my recollection, and I won't repeat all the stuff that you guys said, but I definitely remember the Cowboys meeting the minds with Tom Cable and Marshawn Lynch, and then I remember the next game, the Baltimore game, when Marshawn Lynch dead-legged Ray Lewis in the open field, and I'd never seen Ray Lewis look that foolish, like ever. The guy just didn't have that happen. And they were able to rush for like, I don't know, 140 yards. I remember like 142 is the number in my head. I don't know if that's right, but they rushed for a lot of yards in that game. And I was like, okay, this is real. Like you just did that against a great defense. And the fact that Sherman, I remember also, I wrote an article about Richard Sherman's effect on passer rating. As soon as he came into the lineup, the opponent's passer rating just plummeted for the rest of that year. And I remember Peter King writing toward the end of the season that he was in his all-pro votes. Like this guy, like he's a secret guy. Nobody knows about Richard Sherman yet, but he should be like someone that And by the time we got into 2012, you're right, Rob. I was like, I jumped out of my chair when they drafted Russell Wilson. I was like, this is the guy I wanted. I was so thrilled that they got him. And I have evidence for people that don't believe me. I actually was really excited about that. And then to go into training camp and have Bobby Wagner be a hit and all this other stuff start to work out, it was like, wow, all right. So for me, you talk about the 2012 season, that feels a little bit closer to where we are with this team. And one of the things that was really striking about that season is, remember the offense was kind of like Russ was on training wheels for the beginning. It was really a rough watch for a lot, and they weren't doing that well. And then the Chicago game, they took the training wheels off. He won it in overtime. It was unlike any of the offense we'd seen from them before. And then the read option took off, and they just started blowing people off the field. 49ers, Bills, Arizona, like all that, right? I was like, oh, no, this is the best team in football. And I'm wondering if there's going to be an inflection point like this year for this team where we feel that way. I'm curious, do you guys agree that maybe 2012 is kind of the closest to where this team is? feel differently. Where do you feel like this team's closest?
I think
I feel differently.
Yeah, tell me.
I find it really hard. I don't know if there is a comparison in my sort of time following the Seahawks. It feels very different, and I'm not sure which way it's going to go. I must admit, I'm obviously desperately hoping it's going to go the way of that you've suggested. It may do, where they just whether it's this week or in a couple of weeks, and it just clicks and something's there, and we go, right, okay, this is the real deal. I want that so badly. For the Seahawks to be, a serious team in the NFC. There's just something keeping me back from that at the minute. I just think it's the way that they're dealing with the end of these games. I just want to see, and also I want to see them beat a good team. I don't care whether it's at home or on the road. When they play the Packers and they get a bit embarrassed last year, and the way that they lost to blew the Rams game last year, the fact that they lost to the Niners in week 1, it feels to me, I don't, maybe you guys can think of a game. I feel like the only really quality win they've had in the last few years is when they went to the Lions and kept winning there. And that included when the Lions became good. They got a good quality win on the road against the Lions a couple of years ago. I need to see them do that. There may well be a game coming up. Maybe it's just the Rams. I don't know. But I go and beat a Chiefs. Go and beat a Bills. Go and beat a Lions, a Packers, an Eagles. I need to see them do something like that. I think when that 2012 team gave the Niners the biggest arse kicking ever on like the 23rd of December. That is probably my favorite game as a Seahawks fan, probably even more than the Super Bowl, because I knew then that this team had a chance. That was the game, like, okay, this is real. I want to see something like that. I want to sit there in my chair and think, do you know what? Yes. And I've not seen it yet from this team.
So I agree with Rob in terms of like that. There hasn't been that San Francisco moment. But I actually think 2012 is a really good comp. Because I don't know if you remember, like the first half of the year, they had some really frustrating moments where they should. Like I remember watching with my dad, and they played Miami that year.
That Dolphins game.
And
I knew you were say that. I hated that game so much.
I was telling my dad how good the Seahawks team is, how good Russell Wilson is, and he's like, I don't know, like no one talks about the Seahawks. You're just being a homer. And they go out and like they lose to Ryan Tannehill as a rookie, and it was a very mid Dolphins team, and he's just like, I'm sorry, like you don't have it. And they played Detroit that year. Like they couldn't cover Titus Young. I don't know if you remember that game.
Yeah, Matt Stafford.
Yeah, Sherman like was all over Calvin Johnson. And then the first time they played San Francisco, I actually went to that game in San Francisco. By the way, horrible experience at Candlestick Park. My least favorite sporting experience live ever. I hated it. They were awful in that game. They lost 13-6. It was a lot like the opener this year. It was like a close game where nothing happened. And it really wasn't until like they broke out and really that Chicago game where you saw the whole thing click together, where the offense, defense, and I was talking about with you the other day, like the first and third quarters of that Texans game was the first time this year where I've seen everything hit at the same time. And they looked like the best team I've seen, the best version of this team. But a lot of this year, the last 3 games, they've had games where they dominated 95% of it, but it felt uncomfortable because that 5% was so bad. And those were very mad teams, Arizona, Jacksonville, Houston. And so I get where Rob's coming from, where you're like, okay, we need to do this against a stud team. But the first half of 2012 was a lot like that. And there was games where like they were barely beating Carolina, and there was a Hail Mary and things like that. It was frustrating. And I don't know if we're going to get the 50-point thing, but when all these things hit at the same time, I think we can see a special team. But they're young. They're learning how to win. Mike McDonald is not nearly as established as Pete was in that time. He's still learning on the job. Clint Kubiak's learning on the job. But I think the ceiling is there. Like the cool thing I see comparables is you're starting to see these guys emerge. And with Brian, we've talked about it for years. Where's the blue chip guys? We've seen some guys turn into blue chip players. We've seen all of a sudden people are looking at this team. They're like, holy crap. The volume of young players on their first contract for this team is huge. Byron Murphy, like a lot of teams don't have 10 guys who are all hitting at the same time. Like someone was asking the other day, like, who are the Seahawks that are disappointing this year? And the only ones I could really think of were like Christian Haynes and I can't remember who else I said. Not Tyrese Knight. Like, not a lot of guys have taken steps back. Maybe Witherspoon, you can argue, but he's been hurt. The volume of guys that seem to be hitting and are being above it. Lawrence is hitting. Sam Darnold's been above expectations. I think you could see the 2012 if they could get out of their own way.
Yeah, the things for me about 2012 are, one, I don't think that Sam Darnold is Tavares Jackson. I think Sam Darnold can be your quarterback. Now, I'm not set on that. There's things he could do this year. If we see more of those types of bad decisions in key moments, then I think you got to be careful. But I think he's already eclipsed what I think I ever expected him to be able to do here. And I think it's reasonable to expect that he could stick around. That's huge. I mean, all by itself, that separates it from 2011 in my mind. And then I feel like this team doesn't have a clear weakness. And what feels like their biggest obstacle, we've all talked about it, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse with it, is just to get out of their own way. Like, reducing errors is a lot different than proving value or proving capability. And that's much more under their own control. So I feel like they're kind of like all the ingredients are there for them to potentially break out and have one of those big, I think it's got to be a primetime game against a big opponent. And unfortunately, the Rams game is not going to be a primetime, at least as far as I know right now. And this game against Washington, I thought it might qualify before. It matters that it's prime time, but you know, it's not. Washington is, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but Washington is not an NFC championship contender the way they were a year ago. So they do, to your point, Rob, they have to have that moment. They have not had it yet. And I think the question is whether they're going to get to it this year or whether they need another off season to kind of complete the picture. So good stuff there, guys. Let's get some questions from our patrons over on patreon.com/hawkblogger. First one comes from Silk. This is for the panel. He says, what's something that fans can do, in your opinion, to be smarter, better Seahawks fans? Rob?
Wow. That's a hot potato.
Listen to Rob Staten and read his stuff.
No, do you know what I would say on that is draw your own conclusions. I think part of, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody, you know, we all kind of have our favorites, don't we? That we listen to in the footballing sphere, the opinion makers. And I think over the years, you know, I'll keep this short. Over the years, I think we have, as a fan base, have drawn our dividing lines and picked sides on too many issues. And the beauty of this season is that I don't think we have any of those right now. Mm-hmm. I think we may have some small ones. Some people think that Anthony Bradford needs to be shot into the sun on a space rocket, and some people don't. But it's not a big topic. It's not like running backs don't matter. It's not like Carroll needs to go. No, he needs to be given a job for life. It's not like Geno Smith is good. No, Geno Smith's not good. We don't have anything. We're kind of united for the first time in a while. It'd be really great to maintain that for a period of time. So let's not be too extreme and groupthinky, but also, you know, let's just not attach ourselves to what. Like that, there was definitely, I found that this offseason there was a lot of trendy opinions spinning around on the internet which people adopted, and I think I'm not for a second suggesting that I'm not guilty of this, but I'd love for us to just maintain this harmony that we have right now. It's not really answer the question, but it's kind of the question I wanted to answer, I guess.
I love where you took it, Jeff. For me, I think it's just my approach doesn't have to be for everyone's, but I like to look at numbers because they're generally objective. Whether, you know, how you interpret them is not, but it gives, if you have a question and you look at numbers and it either supports or challenges it, it makes me think. And then I like to watch the film, like actually watch the guys play. And usually you find people that get stuck in one and not in the other. And I think that makes you, I think, less credible overall. So, you know, it takes time, it takes, you know, interest, but those are the two things for me, getting to understand the numbers, look at the numbers, but then also following it up by watching actual games and actual players to decide if you agree or you discover something else about why the numbers might be misleading.
Yeah, like obviously you have the time to do that, and you have the more information you can collect, I think the better. But the problem with film is a lot of people don't know what to look for. I like me myself sometimes, like I don't know if I'm educated enough to know like the X's and O's, and that's where some of the like the stuff. It's like you give too many people all 22, they don't really know what to do with it. And I kind of like to lean where Rob's going. Like I don't think there's one way to get better as a fan. You can ask a million ways. I think try to take in as much information as you can. Obviously, it's great. There's so much information out there. But I think the best idea is to think for yourself, form your own opinions. Like, for example, one of the people you have on your show, Brian, who I think is really admirable, one of he does is Griff. I think Griff has different opinions. I admire how much he just learned about the game. But I think what's become a little dangerous is Griff's kind of created these like offshoots of people who just like talk about what he says like it's politics and nothing against him. It's just like there's all these people that form this like Cody Barden hive and all these people. And I'm not saying Griff is very convincing in what he does. And I think that's what I like talking to Griff a lot offline because I learned from him. And I really admire that he'll go out there. And even if he's wrong, he'll joke about it. But like, I've noticed like people online, like they sound like mini Griffs. And like, I don't think that's the best way to become fans. I think the best way to become fans is kind of do your own thing, like learn about it. There's so many varying perspectives on the Seahawks and the NFL in general, whether you like numbers, whether you like, find your beat writer who you feel like, go listen to the radio. Like there's so many different things where you can learn a lot. I try to take in a lot of content. Obviously people don't have time. I've had less time since I've had a child, but find the kind of people you feel provide the best information and learn from it. Find something that stands out to you.
I think that's great advice. And I think Griff's great at what he does and absolutely no shade there at all. And I think I'll just say this, like when you're watching film, I'm not watching it with like this X's and O's expertise all the time for sure. I'm no Griff or Maddie or any of those guys. But if you watch players play, if you watch enough football, you know when there's like, okay, that guy seems to be causing a lot of trouble or this guy seems to be having a lot of trouble. You don't have to be an expert to know a lot of what's going on. I think some of the nuances you'll miss, but the thing that I'm talking about is people are like, oh, this guy's terrible because someone cuts up like 2 of his worst clips. And then you go watch every snap and you're like, but like all the other snaps were not like that. So that's what I'm just saying. Like to Rob's point, come to your own conclusions, use a little bit of numbers and actually watching things to come to those conclusions is my advice. All right. Next one. This one I'm going to give to Rob. This comes from DieGoat05. He says, if the Seahawks were down 5 with 2 minutes to go and needed a TD to win the game, rank these 4 QBs on who you'd want leading the game-winning drive. Seahawks version of Russell Wilson, 2022-2023 version of Geno Smith, Sam Darnold based off of this year, or Eagles game Drew Lock.
Eagles. So what? Crap until the last drive. Is that?
Yes.
Sorry, Drew, if you're listening. It was a great last drive. I'm Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson at his peak had many moments. You know, I for some reason the Minnesota game was it the COVID year when they had that great start to the Russ Cook season. And I think it was raining and they had like the 4th down conversion on that drive. And it was after that game that I think everyone thought this is his MVP season. He's the guy, he's the best player in the league for that period of time. And then obviously the wheels fell off a little bit that year, but yeah, Russ would be my answer for that.
Yeah. Jeff, I'll give the same one to you. Who would be your top pick?
I would go Russ too, because I think his legs when he was like in his peak version was such a weapon on those 2-minute drives. And whenever you were in trouble, it seemed like he can just kind of run for a first down and give you something that like none of these other guys could. Russ with this personnel and this offense would be pretty interesting because I don't know if Russ in the Shanahan offense, but I think I'm thinking too deeply into the question. Yeah. But I think Russ is just the ceiling and what he could do with his legs. And we've seen the 2-minute drill against the highest quality of teams so many times. I think you'd have to go him.
Yeah, there's an inevitability with Russ in those situations, and other teams felt it too. So I 100%. All right, last question I'm going to take tonight on this one from patrons. I'm going to give this to Rob because it's custom made for him. It comes from Sovereign Alex. It says, at what is basically the midway point of the season, what would be your ideal position for the Seahawks to draft in round 1 of the 2026 draft, taking into account age of different units, contracts, all that stuff.
Okay, so I personally am going to answer this question with an opinion also on what I think is going to be there, because I think that has to play into it as well. Now, I think if there was a great cornerback, if a cornerback emerges between now and the draft, I think that you'd have to be open-minded about getting some extra depth there. If Tariq Woolen leaves, that becomes an increasingly important position. So I think that's there. But I'm looking at the cornerback depth in this draft class at the minute, and I'm just not seeing it. So I'm struggling with that one. I think there are some good receivers there if you wanted to go in that direction, depending on what the sort of the long-term outlook is for someone like Cooper Kupp. I think there are 2 or 3 receivers that you could justifiably take in the top 30 with the way that they're playing. 1 or 2 of them have actually played way better than I thought they were going to do sort of going into the season. But the answer that I'm going to give perhaps will not be surprising is the offensive line. I just think it matches up to what is available in this draft. You have a whole bunch of good zone blocking right tackles who are
offensive line. You said defensive line.
My apologies. That's
why I was like, oh wow, defensive line.
That's 12:54 in the morning coming on. Offensive line. There are a whole bunch of right tackles who are great at zone blocking, who inevitably are going to have to kick inside to guard. It's the reverse Gray's able, and it's. I just think there's so many attractive players. I can give some names. There's a guy called Brian Parker at Duke who's playing right tackle for them. I think he might be the best zone blocking grade in the whole of college football so far, and it shows on tape. He's absolutely superb. You've got Francis Mayogoa, who may go too early for the Seahawks at Miami. I think he's a guard. He's playing right tackle, just a brawler, fantastic. Jennings Dunk at Iowa, another really good zone blocker who's going to have to kick inside. You've got Kalen Rutledge at Georgia Tech, probably more of a mid-rounder, but if he tests well, will start to move up. You've got Vega Ione at Penn State, who's very interested, playing left guard, but's going to have to move inside. And then, how early is Spencer Fano going to go? Like he's for me, he's a top 5 type right tackle, but I know some people I think Dane Brugler thinks he's going to kick inside to guard. So that could impact his stock a little bit. Could be one of those things like, who thought Byron Murphy's going to be there? All of a sudden, he's there for you. So I think that sort of feeling that maybe they do need somebody else other than Anthony Bradford for the long haul matches up with the draft class. So I've kind of given the positions, I think, cornerback and that. I'd say edge rusher as well. I just don't see edge rushers in this draft in round 1.
So
that's all.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you, because I think when I'm looking at the organization long term, I think their biggest question coming out of this year is the edge rush, because DeMarcus Lawrence is an older player. I don't know what you do with Boye. It's one of the biggest questions. And then Nwosu's a free agent after the year, so that's a lot of uncertainty at that spot. And they're going to need to get another young guy in there, and a good one, but doesn't sound like the draft is lining up. It's an ugly first round, man, in general.
It's really ugly. It's going to be a bloodbath in round 1. Like, teams are going to be like desperately trying to trade, I think, the veteran market when you get there, because even the players who are getting rated. So Ruben Bain, have you heard of Ruben Bain? Like, the Miami is getting a lot of the top 5 tour. He's got 30-inch arms on a 270, and he's a run defender. Like, how many of those players with short arms, run defenders go in the top 5? Not many. People are putting him in the top 5. I think he's a round 3 pick who could go in the top 65. That's not a first round pick. You've got Kedrick Folk at Auburn. He's got 2 sacks all year. People say he's a top 10 pick. Like, he's not. Finish. TJ Parker at Clemson, terrible season. Like, these players are not performing well enough. I would love to say, hey, there's 10 of pass rushers, edge rushers, and the Seahawks can go and get one of these guys. Just don't see it.
Interesting. Awesome stuff there. All right, let's turn our attention to this Commanders game for the little bit that we've got left. Before I do that, I do want to give folks just a heads up. I talked about this on Tuesday. We have forever been donating to charitable causes, over $300,000 that we've donated over the years. We've already done our Ben's Fund donation this year. We're going to do some My Cause, My Cleats later. But we just made a donation to HopeLink, which helps feed families that can't feed themselves. And if you don't know, folks that are on food stamps in the U.S. are going to lose that budget starting next week. for the first time ever, really. And this is not a political issue. I worked with people that are on food stamps for the last 2 years of my career. There's as many people on one side of the political aisle as there are on the other that receive food stamps. A lot of these folks are elderly, disabled, or kids. So it's going to be a pretty big emergency for folks to get food. If you would take a look at the link in chat, also the link in the description of the video. Would love to add some more folks to donate. I've been in contact with the CEO over at HopeLink, and she is really grateful for all of your donations already. So let's keep helping people get some food in their bellies while we're all sitting here talking about football. I'd appreciate it. All right. Now, let's talk about this game. And we're going to working. Look at that. We fixed it. All right. That was super exciting. So we're going to look at this Seahawks game. We're going to make some picks, and courtesy of the Sleeper app. And I'm going to give you guys run of the list here. You've got JSN at 93.5 receiving yards. His that's a big number. Jaden Daniels 1.5 passing TDs. Sam Darnold 243 yards passing. Bill Krosky Merritt 43.5 rushing yards. I gotta jump in. I gotta go less than that. Like I don't know how they're gonna run against the Seahawks. I feel like that's gonna be a rough one. I'm gonna scroll through these as you guys are seeing them come up. Anything that's catching your eye?
I'm having that JSN, every day of the week.
Which one? The one at the top?
Yeah, the 93.5 yards.
You want the over?
Oh yeah, I think he is delivering that kind of a performance every week at the minute. He is, one of the top players of the season in the NFL at any position, and the Commanders couldn't cover me at the minute. So I'm gonna give that. I'm gonna go with the JSN one for sure.
All right, Jeff, your choice now. Anything jumping out to you?
I don't mind the Zach Ertz one. I think they got to throw the ball to someone.
So you're going to go more?
I'm going to go more for Zach Ertz. I think they got to throw to someone. I think they might be playing from behind a little bit. I think if there's one area they can attack on the Seahawks, it's the linebackers. So I'll go with Ertz.
I don't know how it works, but I'm going less on Cooper Kupp since he's got a heel and a hamstring. I don't know if we can lock that in or not. But yeah, there we go. Bill getting under 43.5 rushing yards for the Commanders. JSN going over 93.5 receiving yards for the Seahawks. Ertz going over 36.5 and Kupp going under 39.5. If you haven't already, take advantage of the free $20 you get on Sleeper without even making a deposit. Or you can use promo code Hawks, and you can use promo code Hawks. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, guys. Let's talk about our picks for this game, how we think this game is going to go. Rob, since you are an honored guest, we're going to give you some time to think about this. Jeff, you're up first. What do you think is going to happen in this game? What's going to be the final score?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough game for Washington. I think the way the matchup works and the Seahawks coming off a bye, they're coming off a short week against the Chiefs, where it was a pretty tough game for them. I don't love this Washington team. I look at their roster, and Brian, I heard you with their beat writer, and he didn't seem to kind of agree with your assessments on their offseason. I was a little shocked to hear that because I've been kind of punting out my opinion on them. I thought they had a very peculiar approach to their team, and they're old and they're slow. And they don't have a lot of strengths other than Jaden Daniels going in Superman mode.
And they signed low ceiling players to big contracts. Javon Kinlaw is like, I would have been
$15 million a year he got.
If we paid $15 million a year for Javon Kinlaw. I don't get it.
No, I don't agree with how they approach the offseason. I think they should have been trying to either load up on players for that rookie contract, and their only players were older. And just watching them, they look old and slow. And for Jaden Daniels' rookie contract, they have an old and slow roster. To me, it's perplexing. And I thought what they did last year just kind of set the foundation of like mid free agents. I thought made a lot of sense, but they didn't build on it. So I look at this team, I don't see a lot of strengths. And Terry McLaurin is their real only blue chip player outside of Jaden Daniels, and he's not playing. And then, so I don't see how they're going to run the ball. I think it's going to be really hard for them to move the ball on offense unless Daniel goes supersonic. and I don't see a lot of pass rushers, and I see areas of their team they can attack. So unless the Seahawks just completely crap on themselves coming out of the bye, I just think this matchup looks really good and really advantageous for what the Seahawks do well. And we've seen the defensive line take over the last couple weeks. I think it's going to happen again. I think the defense, I know, like, it's obviously not great having Julian Love, but I don't think it's going to matter that much in this game. I just don't see, like, I thought they played really hard in the first half against Kansas City, but then the second half, you just saw the talent limitations, and KC went up 21-0 in that half. And I don't know if the Seahawks are at the Chiefs level yet, but I think it's going to be a similar story.
It's pretty interesting because the odds are moving the other direction. They were at 3.5. I'm seeing some books all the way down to 2.5 today. So for whatever reason, odds are kind of starting to slip toward the Commanders. Rob, you want to go next? You want me to give you more time?
No, I'm going to predict a 20 points to 11 score because it's kind of a quirky looking score. I think the Seahawks will end up playing with the food a little bit in this one, and will probably give up a touchdown late on. The Commanders will probably flirt with making it interesting, but not quite get in there. I agree with everything Jeff said about the defense of Washington. It just does not look good. It looks like a bad defense. And they're pinning their hopes on Jaden Daniels coming back and providing this huge spark, which he's capable of. But how healthy is he? And we've been here before with like this particular franchise. We've got to keep this franchise savior out there, and then it ends up backfiring. That's what happened to RG3 in that playoff game, because they were so desperate to have that success and to build on it and everything like that. I just wonder whether they need to take a bigger picture view on this and just sort of accept the fate for this year and think about what they need, what's best for their franchise quarterback, and not sort of getting him back on the field. Now, there are a couple of things that worry me. We talked about on the Seahawks Collective, Brian, that this feels like a must-win for the Commanders. Mm-hmm. I'm always a bit worried when I think the Texans are in that position this week against the Niners and they beat the Niners. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I'm also, for some reason, I'm just don't ever trust the Seahawks off the back of a bye. Like, it should be a positive thing. But for some reason, I don't know if this is correct. So I've not had a look over the years. But they seem to play a bit crap after a bye. So I'm a bit worried that that's going to be a thing as well. But the Seahawks are the better team. I think Nick Emenwari is going to have a monster game. I think he's probably going to be tasked with a lot of keeping an eye on Jaden Daniels scrambling around, and he'll take that away. So 2011, very similar to maybe some of their other wins, but another road win for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I love it.
I didn't give a score.
You didn't?
No.
What did you say? I thought you.
I didn't say. I just said they're going to win.
Okay, what's your score?
Let's go 27-17 Seattle.
Okay, I must have like hallucinated a score. I could have sworn you said a score. And for what it's worth, Rob, the Seahawks not only won after the bye week last year and Mike McDonald's first year as head coach, they beat the 49ers for the first time in like 3 or 4 years. And they went on a 4-game win streak after the bye last year. So
hope it happens again.
Here's the thing, guys. This is a game that should be like 42-10. Like that's, I mean, honestly, it is a huge mismatch with advantages on both sides of the ball that are massive. And part of me just wants to step out onto the frozen pond, onto the ice, test it, and see if it'll hold my weight, because I think this team's eventually going to stop playing with their food and just eat it. But I'm not quite to a 42-10 kind of game. I think what this is going to end up being is still a pretty convincing game for the Seahawks, but I'm going to go 27-14 for the Seahawks. I think to Rob's point, anytime that you feel like you figured out the NFL and one team so clearly should win, the other team somehow makes a game of it. So it won't surprise me if this ends up being a massively frustrating game, but I'll be honest, if the Seahawks lose this game, it will be up there with one of the worst losses in Mike McDonald's time. Like, not because I think, losing the Giants at home obviously will take the cake for probably a long time, hopefully forever. That's his worst loss. But the Seahawks they're rested. They have advantages. They're a better team. They're going against a team that's injured itself. Win it. Like, you are prepared. Go win it. So that's my take. Hopefully we will see all that come. I've got a couple super chats here we'll get through real quick. Mr. Aplasib says, love how you spotlight opponent strengths in press conferences. You're flagging red zones so players, coaches keep them top of mind. Great insight. Well, thank you for that. Detail-oriented Bobby says, Brian, honest question. I feel like some teams play with injury reports and trying to throw off scouting or planning for game day. Any chance there's anything that to do that with Hawks? I don't think this happens. I really don't. I think there's sometimes coaches put like every player on the injury report as a when they get harassed by the NFL just to get back at them. But for the most part, I think they try to be honest with their injury reports. I don't know if you guys feel differently about any of that.
I don't feel differently about it. I just think it's interesting that the NFL does this. You know, in the sports over here in Europe, it's like a trade secret. Like
Oh, really?
If I mean, we stop asking questions. I've stopped asking injury questions of coaches over here in the sports recover because they'll just go, I'm not telling you. Like Mike McDonald does. It's exactly like that. But they don't have to say there's no injury report at the end of the week, like to say this guy's questionable. It's just, no, you find out an hour before the game starts what the team is. And in rugby, it's slightly different. They tend to announce the team the day before who's actually starting. So I'm not sure whether there's anything in it. Sometimes I do think that teams play around with it a little bit. Wasn't there something like, I'm sure there was something like every player in one of of Belichick's injury reports was injured or something.
Yeah.
And you know what he's like.
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating that they do it as a thing at all. Like it's just
all
not
about betting. It's all about gambling.
It's tied to gambling. So the NFL gets so much revenue from gambling. And it's what makes their sport so big. And I think that's why they do it, and how much is. And now that fantasy football has become a thing, and they have to be pretty serious. Like the Ravens got in trouble last week because they mislabeled Lamar. I think teams are pretty stringent about it. Like in hockey, like in Canada, hockey is treated like the NFL is in America, and they won't even refer to injuries at all. They're called upper body injuries and lower body injuries. That could be anything: a knee, a leg, a foot. That's a lower body injury. They talk about it like it's a nuclear code. Like they won't disclose anything. And you see football, they know, like, if the guy's got a bad knee, they know everything about it. And people always joke, like, why don't they just, like, attack the knee? But it's never really happened where that's happened. And so, yeah, the real reason to do it is purely tied to gambling and betting. And the sharps want to know everything about these guys because they are what makes these Vegas lines such big deals. And yeah.
All right. Dogzilla Monster says some of the 2013 teams seemed a bit, quote, psycho, like scary to meet in person. Any of the same chemistry this year? I don't think so. And I don't know if any of those guys were really psycho. I understand why people might think that, but I think that's probably just an on-field persona. Cam Chancellor seemed crazy, but off the field, he's a pretty nice, mild-mannered guy. All right, last one. Smoke Hawk, who's been a member here for 13 months. Thank you for the loyalty. Says, what are everyone's thoughts on Barn Burner? Are you talking about the nickname for the
AJ Burner? Is it the dance name?
I think it's for his touchdown celebration, maybe. I mean, it's a little on the nose for me personally. Not my favorite.
I love the barnyard thing. I know
Barnyard's
you don't.
Kind of funny.
I just think it's perfect.
Yeah,
for what it is. So I quite like that.
It is funny. I don't like Death Zone that much.
No, it's not great. They need a better name either for the D line or the defense.
Yeah.
They need a cool name, but
I genuinely don't think they need a name. I think maybe Super Bowl champions would be a nice name.
That would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, why don't we just beat the Rams first? Why don't we do that?
That is the thing, man. That is the key. Like we're a couple weeks away from that. Unfortunately, we'll see what happens with Julian Love, who's not on IR yet. But sure would be nice if somehow he was available for that game. All right. Rob, anything folks should be checking out on your channel before we let you go?
I'm actually going to go and write something about this is ridiculous, about McKinley Jackson has just requested a trade from the Bengals, so I'm going to chuck out 400 words on that right now.
Love it. Love it. All right. Appreciate all you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for Rob Staten joining us in the middle of the night, as he often does. Everyone enjoy what has got to be an amazing Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens game. I can't wait to not watch that game next. Take care.